we can literally be the same human beings with completely different lenses on how we view the world, not because we're trying to be ignorant, not because we're not seeking the truth, but just because the only information available to us in our own language is being shaped by a media source that's either state-controlled or...
It's a fucking mess. And what you're saying, though, also goes back to something I believe we've talked about in every episode we've ever done together, because it's a mentality of the world. 97, 107, 150. We probably talked about it with Jim and Danny when we've done those crossovers. But, like, what is good and what is bad? And moreover, what is all good and what is all bad? And is that even a thing? Right? Because, I mean, you've heard the quote, and people can throw this around sometimes where it's like, it's being used as an excuse on things, but one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter or whatever. And you do that example you give with our jets in the Red Sea firing into Yemen, where people have fucking nothing. And, you know, they're just looking at the people who are taking leadership in their country and saying, maybe that's the right idea. And then suddenly bang, 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 bang. You know, I might think, if I were them and I can't know what that is, I might think the same thing.
All of a sudden, a narrative can be formed.
Yes.
Right? And the narrative is what you rationally tell yourself based off of the emotional messages that you get. So that's the thing that kills me, is every time the United States takes an action in a foreign country, we don't control the messaging of what happens after that action.
Right.
Local press, local politicians, local whatever, leaders, they all shape whatever happened into the narrative or into the messaging that creates a narrative. The same thing is happening here in the United States. Here's one of the things that pisses me off so much, and I'm not trying to jump ahead.
Go for it.
How often do you come across a headline that talks about some stupid battlefield victory that Ukraine has over Russia? The other day I was flipping through my news feed, and I saw a 2-pound Ukrainian drone downs a Russian helicopter.
They have a video too?
Probably. But I see this stuff all the time, right? What that is a message.
Yeah.
It's sending a message to get us like, hoorah, go democracy. Why? Because the messaging we've been told about Ukraine is that they're fighting for democracy. So when we see a news report that says something stupid about, you know, Russia lost 25 tanks in this assault on a village, or Russian helicopter shot down by a 2-pound drone, those are all just little pieces of a message. An emotional message is supposed to get us gung-ho so that we click. I'm not saying it's a government conspiracy. We're just supposed to click on the article. But you see this stuff come across, and none of those individual messages are painting an accurate picture of what's happening between Russia and Ukraine. Like, they're marching towards stalemate at best.
Yes.
And Russia gaining more ground at worst. So why are we seeing these headline clickbait talking about these stupid battlefield victories? Because we're in the United States, and our local news in the United States, our American English language news, is what dictates what we see and how we view the world. The same thing happens in Yemen. The same thing happens in Iran. The same thing happens in Saudi Arabia. The same thing happens in China. The same thing happens in Japan. Their local national language, press and newspapers are what dictate what they see and the lens that those people see the world through as well. So it's we can literally be the same human beings with completely different lenses on how we view the world, not because we're trying to be ignorant, not because we're not seeking the truth, but just because the only information available to us in our own language is being shaped by a media source that's either state-controlled or commercially controlled, and the commercially controlled is just going to say whatever they need to say to get a click.
Look, I've never seen a war zone myself, and I'm very grateful for that. It's a real privilege to live here that I can say that. I see the type of misinformation that fires from all sides in every war I've ever looked at in my life, with exactly what you're talking about right here. But I also sometimes wonder, to take a step farther, if I were actually there. Because, you know, war's not happening on one street. It's happening in a whole country, right? There's a million different places it is. If I were actually there and in the middle of it, and like everyone else, I had internet access and could read the stories that are happening, I wonder if I would actually even get to the point where I let my eyes not believe what they were seeing and instead believe what I was reading. And I think about that all the time with the Ukrainians and the Russians in the conflict, because who the fuck knows what they're being told. I mean, we had Mark Turner in here for episode 162. He's been training Ukrainian battalions with his organization, which is a U.S. organization, since like day one there. He was saying this last October when he was here. He's like, he's a Scottish former Marine. So the guy's like a badass. But he's like, they're fighting over like two yards of territory and it's taken 2 weeks and they're losing all these people. And we're just like, you know, it's a, to use your word, it's a stalemate everywhere where it's just bodies piling up. And so if I looked back on some of your maybe timeline predictions in episode 97 and 107, and then I remember you talked about that with Lex for a long time, some of your timelines are off, but some of your themes were correct. You're like, okay, Russia looks like it's kind of a paper tiger because obviously they didn't roll over them in 2 days, but they're more powerful. They can throw way more bodies at the issue. They're going to try to get some access towards the Black Sea and do that. They didn't do it as fast with the winter like you were thinking, but effectively we've been, to me, sold this idea that Ukraine and the Ukrainians who are fighting for their land right there, I have a lot of respect for that, like they're pushing Russia back into Russia or some shit, and that's just not true.
Right.
Now, maybe I'm fucked up and wrong here, but I would think if we were able to negotiate a peace today, a ceasefire, which I would love to see, where it is, I almost think it'd be like a win for Ukraine because they'd maintain a lot of their country. They probably would have to agree not to go into NATO and all that stuff, but like it would end the possibility that eventually, you know, that stalemate will just kind of break the wrong way and Russia will take half the country.
Right. And you're totally right. I've been kind of pounding this drum since August after the invasion happened. There is no outcome. There is no winning where Ukraine takes back the territory that Russia has taken from them. And there certainly is no winning scenario where Zelensky's promise to return Ukraine back to its like 1996 borders, there's no way any of that's going to happen. At best, what they're looking for is that the Russian advance will stop and that eastern Ukraine will essentially fall under some sort of independent government that is favorable towards Russia. And western Ukraine will have a new government put in place that is net neutral to Russia, but that Russia accepts, because they will not accept a pro-NATO, pro-West government. And they certainly won't accept Zelensky remaining in power in western Ukraine. So Zelensky's coming to the United States or the UK. He's going somewhere outside of Russian reach, like so many people have tried to get outside of Russian reach. But now that he's been this champion of democracy under the Biden administration, there's no way that we can let anything bad happen to Zelensky. So he's going to be whisked off to some Miami high-rise and live out his days there.
Thank you for watching the video, guys. If you haven't already subscribed, please smash that subscribe button and check out this clip's full podcast episode by clicking here or in the description below.